Hello, everyone. I'm Lana Bishop, Client Services Manager at Top Builder, and we welcome you here today. We have very important and exciting things to share. And before I turn it over to Dave, I have just a few housekeeping items to go over. First, we are using GoToWebinar, and you should see an attendee console where there are tabs for questions and chat options. Please feel free to submit your questions or comments at any time, and we'll address them before we end our session today. You can also minimize the GoToWebinar console by clicking the red arrow button at the top left of the console. And to maximize it, you can bring it back by clicking the red arrow again. If handouts are included, they can be downloaded through the console as well. Please note that this webinar is being recorded, and a link to it, as well as a link to our entire series of webinars, will be emailed to you and include the slide presentation, any handouts, and our contact info. So now that we've covered these items, it's my pleasure to introduce Dave Knowles, our president of Top Builder. Dave, please take it away.
Hey, Lana, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. Good morning, everybody. And thanks for attending. As Lana said, we do have some very important and interesting things to talk to you about today. This is one of my favorites. So if it's not the favorite topic, I've been looking forward to this for quite a while. And quite frankly, it's overdue, and we will probably recycle this at some point this year. Not because we're looking for content, because we have plenty of content, but this is just that important. We may even recycle it a couple times. We may even present this at the International Builder Show and other places where we'll see y'all. And okay, with that, let's get started. All right, so if you've been to our webinars before, you know we hold a standard agenda. We go through an update on the webinar series. We talk a little bit about us. We go fast through these things. We have a quick poll question for you today on the subject itself. We're going to cover the topic background. Why is it important? Why we chose this subject, and where does it fit in the webinar series? And then we're going to go over the topic itself. Typically, there's some sort of demo, walkthrough, or some examples that we'll share with you. Today, I've underlined examples because we're really just going to show you some examples. And you got to keep in mind that this topic, while it's proven, it's well defined, the execution of this topic is very dependent on your company or you as a builder or a new home sales professional. So the topic is solid, but the way you execute it will vary depending on your company. We'll do a Q&A at the end. If you have questions, just put them in the chat little box in the GoToMeeting control panel. And Lana's going to keep track of those, and we'll cover them at the end. And then we'll do a short survey at the end of the webinar. It'll be sent out to you, I think, either an email or it'll pop up when we close the webinar. I don't see it, so I'm not really sure. But we do have people answering them. And we try to keep these to about 30 to 35 minutes each week, which is hard because I talk a lot. But anyways, that's what we're going to try to do. Okay. So real quick, an update on the webinar series. If you haven't been to these before, we do 3 a month. The first Thursday, the second Thursday, and the third Thursday of the month. We are at the third Thursday of the month, which means we're doing an educational topic. And then the last week of the month, we're going to send out a newsletter summarizing the webinars, and we'll also talk about other news and announcements. Now, I'm going to pop up the webinar series screen for you all. Here, this is what it looks like on our website. So we're doing this one right now. And then we have the other ones that are planned here. And then if you go down below, you'll see at some point, you'll see previous webinars. And that's our webinars that we've done in the past. And make sure that because we have 2 audiences. We have new home sales or home builders, and then we have construction, contractors. So make sure you're looking at the right one. You're you're free to look at either of them, but I just wanted to point that out. All right, so jumping into our background, I do see we have some new folks on here, and we have, wow, we have a lot of people on here, and we have some prospects on here, and we have some partners on here, and we have some, well, former customers on here actually. So that's fantastic. But for those of you who don't know us, we started Top Builder in 2008, built from the ground up for new home sales. And our company, our employees and owners have experience, 20 plus years experience in new home sales, and really, really deep experiences in CRM. And we're going to talk about some of those experiences today because that's what helped us develop this topic, actually. All right, so jumping into the next slide, I'm going to skip over these details here. You can read these in the follow-up if you want to. But let's go ahead and jump into the poll question. We're going to do this really quickly. This helps us get a feel for who's in the audience and what level of experience you have with this topic. And we'll keep it short. It's a yes or no question, or well, yes or no, or I don't know. So go ahead and I'm going to launch the poll question. Please answer this as quick as you can, and I'll repeat the results for you. Okay, wow. This is good. We have 77% of you have already voted. I typically try to get as close to 100% as I can. It doesn't happen typically, but we'll go ahead and close the poll now. Okay, so we're going to close the poll, and okay, this is, I guess, somewhat expected. Only 8% of you have published guidelines for your CRM project. That's a low number, and that's another reason why we're here today, is because we know this, or we have a good feel for it at least. And then 75% of you have no guidelines for CRM, and 17% are unsure. That's a good example of what is going on in the industry, and that's why we're doing this topic. So let's go ahead and jump into the topic background, and so we can talk about why we're doing this. Okay, first of all, this topic is in what we call the educational series. It's the third topic of the month, so we try to go, Top Builder specific topic, a feature spotlight, and then educational. This is the educational topic. Now, at Top Builder, literally, we've done over 1,000 implementations, but over our careers, it's been thousands of CRM implementations. And what we have done is we've taken all this experience and developed our own best practices strategy or process. It's not something we learned from school or attending another webinar or reading a book. This is from our real life experiences. Okay. And there's a good example of this. When I was the CRM project manager at Hewlett Packard, I was hired to come in and save their global CRM project, which had failed multiple times. Different, big six consulting companies in there, Accenture, Pricewaterhouse, all these consulting companies were in there trying to deliver the CRM project for Compaq, which we did again for HP when HP bought Compaq, but it kept failing. And so this is a good testimonial to you all that we implemented this process at HP and got that project live. And it was a big deal. So it's proven. And then also, just so everybody knows, we do this ourselves. At Top Builder, we try to make it a habit, or we do make it a habit that we use the system and we follow our own advice, just like we expect you to. And so we started this process in October. We had the process in place, but we rebuilt it in October, and we've been executing it ever since. Okay, So let's move on. We will, today we're kind of going to keep this at a high level. Each individual component of this strategy is it's its own topic. Okay, so we will have topics on how to develop your company goals and your KPIs and different things like that. We will engage with you all. If you see bullet point number 9 here, Lana, who is our client services manager, is leading this new program we have called the Client Services Program. And so we're going to reach out to our existing and our new customers to discuss this best practices approach and try to help coach you through it. And so while, you know, these concepts are pretty high level, they're very individualized for each builder or realtor. So we can't get into all the weeds on each one because everybody's different and it'll take too long. But we're going to introduce the concepts and the process and the strategy, and hopefully that'll get you interested in moving in the right direction. And I mentioned that it seems time consuming when we're going through this, but trust me, if you don't do this correctly, you could spend a lot more time in your sales and marketing programs and processes, spending a lot of money, wasting a lot of money if you don't do this and don't dedicate yourself to it. Okay, so what does a successful CRM implementation strategy look like? All right, it's 6 steps, essentially. You could collapse it, I suppose, if you want, but it starts with defining, kind of looking at yourself in the mirror, so to speak, as to why do we want a CRM in the first place? You know, why are we doing this? You know, everybody hears about these things. You need a CRM, you need a CRM, you need a CRM. Well, why? Really? Why do we need this? So the first step is let's clearly define that and document that. And we're going to tie that to your company goals. And I'm just going to read through these because I'm going to get into each one of these in a second. Okay, so the next step is once you've defined why you want the CRM or why you're using the CRM, try to develop some metrics around that. We talked about this a little bit in the webinar we had last week, and this is it, man. You've got to quantify what you're doing and why you're doing it. Otherwise, how do you know if this is a success or not? You don't. You can guess, but you really, really don't know. And candidly, you won't know until it's too late. And we're going to talk about that on number 6. Being prepared to react. All right. So after you've done those first 2 things, you're gonna document this and develop standards and guidelines for your team, and you're gonna communicate. And I've got exclamation points all over the place there. It's important. You've got to communicate it. And we noticed on the poll question, which is exactly why we did this poll question, some of you don't know if you have standards or not because it wasn't communicated. A good percentage of you, I forgot what the percentage was. I think it was 17%, is you don't even know. Well, that's nuts to me. So we're gonna fix that with this process. You're gonna monitor and track things, and we're not saying we're gonna spend a lot of time on it, but you got to do it. Okay. And then here's the thing: you got to be prepared to react based on what you're seeing in the numbers, and we'll talk about that in a second. So that's what a successful CRM program looks like. Now let's talk about each one of those. Okay, define why you need a CRM. Well, this could be a 2-hour webinar on the benefits of the CRM. I think you guys know a lot of those and they're fairly well documented, okay? But the way we look at a CRM, it's not about just the CRM. It's about your company and your overall goals. So it needs to start there. And so you need to start with your company goals and understanding that the CRM will help you achieve those goals. Now, you got to focus on the ones that a CRM can help with. You know, you're not talking about, you know, other things like going public or whatever. I mean, CRM sort of helps with that, but you know, we're talking about your sales and marketing goals primarily, okay? And I'm going to give you some examples in a second. things like improving your marketing performance, okay, and your return on investment that you make in your marketing. This is why you have a CRM. Okay, then you're going to look at other things that you measured, which may not be tied directly to your goals. For instance, you're going to, you may want to shorten your sales cycle. Everybody wants to save time and money. CRM helps with that. We're going to define those goals. Team collaboration and organization, internal client and communications with your realtors. Okay, these are good goals. We're going to quantify those in a second. We advise you to start simple. Don't get nuts, okay? Because if you do, you'll lose sight of those goals and you won't be able to measure them and you'll get off track really quickly. And we have to make sure they're realistic, and we'll talk to you about how to develop those realistic goals. Okay. All right. So here's some examples. Your measurable company goals. We want to sell 100 homes this year. That sounds kind of lofty, or maybe just a large, a big goal, kind of a broad goal, but we're going to help you develop those goals and make sure they're reasonable. There'll be historical data that we can look at to help you come up with that goal. And you may want to break that down by individual sales team, community, other things, or you might get real specific about your product type. I know a lot of builders like to sell completed specs and also sell them in a shorter time cycle, because a spec sitting on the ground is money. But these are the types of things we're talking about. And we talked about shortening the sales cycle, shorten the response time for an online lead to 2 hours or less. That's a measurable goal. Number of touch points by sales stage. So in other words, how many times do we need to touch somebody that has walked in, that is a model walk-in? We need a number. We're going to touch them 5 times before they move to the next stage, potentially, which could be a be-back, Shortened days from contract, and I put X and Y in there because that's very variable based on the builder. But also when you're focusing on online sales, appointments to contract. I want, I'm having too many appointments before we sign a contract. I want to bring that down to 2. And so these are just examples. Okay. So number 2, we're going to develop, and we're going to overlap with 1 and 2 here a little bit, but developing measurable and monitoring criteria. So how are we going to measure this stuff? So we talked about this a little bit last week, but if you take these goals, you can develop KPIs. We call them KPIs, key performance indicators, around these goals. And like I said here in the slide, this is a whole little project itself. Doesn't have to take long. It can take just a couple of days, but it does take time and thought and some analysis. But let's say your goal is that 100 sales a year. Could be a quarter, I suppose, but we encourage you to do it annually. And then you can back into some KPIs from that sales. And we use historical data. If we don't have historical data, we can use industry data to help you arrive at these KPIs. I need to convert my web visitors to a qualified lead at 2.5%, a qualified lead to an on-site visit at 17.5%. And I want to convert a third of those to a sale. And those are my KPIs. And if I do that, if you look over here to the right, that means I need to get a certain number of on-site visits. You can break those down by online versus initial walk-ins if you want. I got to be careful not to get too detailed here, but these are all pointing back to those 100 sales. And you're going to monitor that. You're going to track it using some reports and analytics to make sure you're on track. And then you'll, like I said, in the end, we're going to take some action if we're not on track. Okay, so the other goals that we're going to measure: walk-in visitors. We're going to track the average response times for web contacts or chat requests, the number of touch points by sales stage. Like I said, this is overlapping with 1 a little bit. The aging throughout the sales cycle. Okay, we want metrics around that. We're going to track it. you know, in the past, maybe they sat in the first on-site appointment stage for too long. We want to shorten that, and so we're going to measure it and track it, and then things like appointments to contracts. Now, again, this is very individualized for your company. A lot of it depends on how big you are, what type of homes you sell. It's very different. These are just some examples, but we've done this a lot, and we can help you develop these metrics. Okay. All right. And here's some reports, some example reports, some aging reports, and some trending reports to show these metrics over time, and some of the performance of these metrics. And again, these are just examples that I want to show you. But developing your goals. Why do you need a CRM? Number one. How you're going to measure them is number two. And here's some examples. All right. Going on to number three. This is kind of where people get hung up, and this is pretty obvious. But as we saw in the survey or the poll question, it doesn't get done. Only, 8% of you have this, which is not good. Okay, it's a recipe for failure, for sure. This is the biggest one. All right, so develop usage standards and guidelines, and we're going to publish these. Okay, it starts with defining your sales cycle. What does your sales cycle look like? What does each stage mean in the sales cycle? And be very clear. What does it mean? What qualifies as a qualified lead? How do you qualify that? Well, obviously you have to be looking for a home. You have to be looking for a home in our area, as an example, and you have to be looking for a home at our price point. That's an example, but you have to determine what the qualification criteria is, or the stages don't mean anything. Okay, people are just moving things in and out of stages. They don't mean anything. Okay, that you gotta clearly define this criteria. Okay, document what data should be entered. Okay, don't go crazy. We're going to call this the key data, but you're going to document what you need in the CRM to measure. In number two, what you need to measure. Obviously, the statuses have to be set. And you're going to look at the history of the status. By changing the status, you're going to get the history, but you have to make sure the current status is up to date. What we call overall disposition of the prospect. Where are we? Okay. We had a meeting last week. They're talking about pricing, and they're going to contact us next week for a follow-up. That's the disposition. The next step is they're going to call us next week, and we're going to talk about the pricing. You have to document the next step. History or last activity, that's another key data point. You've got to have it. Make sure it's there, but you need to document. You need to document that. The critical notes around each opportunity and why they qualify for each stage. So this person qualified as a, online qualified lead because they found us online. They're looking for a home in our area, and they qualify for that at our price point. So you document that in the notes so everybody knows. Okay. You identify any objections or barriers. What's going to get in the way of the sale, and where did the lead come from? And we've got ways to track that down to finite sources of your leads coming in, so you know where they're coming from and what's working and what's not. Okay, so those are your usage standards. Now, part of that is guidelines on how data should be entered. How do you enter a lead? For a home builder in multiple communities, it could be the community name, hyphen last name, comma first name, and then lead type. They're looking for a completed spec. They're looking for a custom home. They're looking to buy a model. I think you understand. Just how do you enter the data? Because if it's not consistent, you can't make sense of it. The disposition, same thing. The date, a summary, and the next step. Notes, same thing. All data And then you're going to document when is the data to be entered. Because salespeople, they may not, if you don't tell them, you've got to get this information in by Monday because, or by Sunday night, because we have a Monday morning sales and marketing review meeting, then they may not do it. And I hate to be that way, but sometimes, it's human nature. But you have to make it require that they enter the data by a certain time. Okay. And otherwise, by the way, the reports in what we talked about number 2 mean nothing. You won't have the data to support them. Again, keep it simple. All the standards will be monitored, and actually it will become part of your company culture. Here at Top Builder, we don't review our guidelines anymore formally unless we have a new employee. It's part of our culture. We all know what to do now. We know when to do it. We know what to do, and we review it every single week. If you don't do that, it's a recipe for failure. We've seen it many times. Okay. Communicate this. This is huge. This is a short one, but if this is not communicated by management, it doesn't happen, and you fail. This is best practices. This is common sense, but you'll be surprised at how often this does not happen. Now, we go on site and we do this, and when I do the training on site, this is not my topic. I don't cover this. The management team has to stand up and they have to communicate this. So we do 1, 2, and 3 ahead of time, and then in 4, the owner, the sales manager, or somebody in upper management stands up and says, "This is why we have a CRM." First, and then they look around the room to make sure everybody gets it. This is why, and it's documented, of course. And then make sure, and then they say, and this can be funny at times, but they say, "This is your job, and you will be, if you're not doing this, you're fired." Essentially, I hate to be that way, but it's got to be mandatory. And it's not about being controlling. It's none of that, or micromanaging. It's not about micromanaging. It's about making sure we're going to hit our goals. And because we're spending a ton of money on marketing, ton of money on sales. And by the way, that marketing is helping you get traffic into your model home. And if you don't enter the data, we don't know if the marketing's working or not. Okay. And if we don't know if the marketing's working or not, how can we change it so that you get more leads? So that's why we have a CRM. Okay. Now, you're going to communicate that the KPIs will be reviewed every week, and you really should do this with your team. And then you can have some fun with it, okay? Have a contest. The person that has the highest closure rate gets a Amazon gift cards. I tell you what, I hand out Amazon gift cards for different things, and people love them. I mean, it's crazy how much people love those things. And I love them. But, contests and incentives help, and it makes it fun. Okay. All right. So we're almost done, by the way. So we're right on track for the time. So monitoring and tracking, of course, is extremely important. We're talking about this. Top Builder or other CRMs have all kinds of reports to help you monitor and track these things. But every KPI has to be monitored and tracked. Okay, so I'm going to bounce back to the slide up here. Okay, these yellow items are the KPIs, is one example. You have to track these every single week. If you don't, and they fall behind, you're going to get to the end of the year, into the quarter, and you're not going to hit your numbers. And that's a failure. Okay. So let's go back to that tracking. Those numbers have to come out of your CRM, or they have to be electronic. I mean, entering all that data manually is a nightmare, and it's very, very difficult to monitor the trends. Okay, so if you go back up here to one of these slides, or is that the next one? I'm sorry for skipping around here. Where's my slide, man? Okay, this chart over here is a trend. And this can be closure rates as well. These are sales counts, but these could be closure rates. And are my closure rates, or I should say conversion rates, are they trending up or down? Is the aging getting bigger or smaller? Am I going to hit my numbers? If I'm week number 10 into a 52-week year, well, I better be 20% on the way to hit my numbers or I'm falling behind. And again, we can talk about this for weeks, but I want to introduce you the concepts and the examples and what's required to make these programs successful. And that's what we're doing today. Okay, so back to the monitoring and tracking. Yes, we've got to monitor the trends to make sure we're going in the right direction. And then, again, these point back to a goal. Now, one of the things that we like to do, and we encourage our clients and our builders to do this, is on these reports, you can highlight your KPIs. Are we green? Are we tracking against our goal at this point in the year or the quarter? Yes or no? If we're getting close or we're falling behind, it's yellow, and if we're behind, it's red. Just to kind of call out where we're at is something we suggest. Okay, and then finally, this is very, very, very important, is you have to be able to react to these metrics, to this program, and make changes quickly. There's a billion examples about this, from the marketing all the way down to the execution of the contract. And it typically starts with marketing, okay? So if your KPI, if you're not hitting your KPIs, something's broken. And that's what we're saying here. So, I mean, I'll give you 1,000 examples, but if you're not, just as one example, if your web visitors are not converting, and in our KPIs before it was 2.5%, then something's wrong. Your content is not registering with your customers. They're coming to your website and they're bailing out. Why? You got to find out why and fix your content. Something we did at the end of 2020, which gave me a lot of anxiety, I have to admit, is our pay-per-click program was not working. And so if you look at your pay-per-click and your conversion rates of leads that are coming in through your pay-per-click program, if that's not converting, well, your ads or your pay-per-clicks need to be rebuilt or revised. It's very similar to example one, but you're paying for this, man. I mean, you're paying for your web traffic anyways with lots of different reasons, but this is a direct cost and sometimes a huge cost. You got to fix it. Now, there could be other examples. For instance, you're not converting contracts to closings. Well, maybe something's wrong. You know, you're not bidding jobs. It's really kind of price oriented. But if you're not converting your contracts to closing, maybe something's wrong there. Or maybe where you're getting your online sales counselor are setting a bunch of appointments and they're not converting, or they're reverting back to the online process. You know, you send them to the model for an on-site visit and they're not qualified. Okay, you've got to improve your qualification criteria. I could go on forever about these things. Sales, you know, if you're not converting sales, maybe your sales team needs a little training, coaching. Maybe they need better content or collateral to give to your customers. Lots of things to look at, but the numbers never lie. I mean, as long as the numbers are reasonable, and they have to be, we talked about that, and you're not hitting them, something has to change, and you've got to fix it quickly before it's too late. We do it almost every week. Like I said, we're rebuilding our pay-per-click campaign right now. And one thing to make sure of is you make sure you don't fall too far behind. Fix things or you'll lose traction, or you think about whether your goal is reasonable or not. Okay. And so I went through the 6 steps for a successful CRM program. We have done this over and over and over again. Okay. And it works, but you got to go through the process. You've got to make sure it's reasonable, and you've got to execute. You can't just do it and walk away, or it ain't going to happen, and the project will fail. So I don't want that to happen. I want you guys to be successful with your business. This is really about your business. It's not necessarily about CRM. It's really about your business, and I want you all to be successful with your business. And we can help you. So if you need help, let us know. Like I said, we added a program called Client Services. Lana is the Client Services Manager. We're adding that training, the best practices training, to our services. It's part of your subscription. We're not charging for it. We can't spend a week on it with you, but we're gonna get you started at least as part of your subscription. Okay, so please let us know if you need some help with that. Okay, Lana, do you have any questions?
No, we do not have any questions. I think that was a wonderful overview. And like you say, we will be reaching out to engage everyone on the webinar today. So with that in mind, I think we've covered everything, Dave.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, so a programming note, we're right at pretty much 35 minutes. So we're on time. A quick programming note. Typically, we follow up on these webinars the following day, tomorrow. Our video editor is snowboarding right now. And so the edited video it'll probably be Monday before we send out a link to the video this time, but typically it's going to be Friday. We're good about following up, and be looking for our newsletter next week as well, because it's going to summarize the webinars, and we're going to talk about some very important things that we accomplished last year, and also the client services program that Lana is heading up in the newsletter. Okay, so again, thank you everybody for attending. We appreciate it, and one good indicator is people do not leave, and we did not have anybody leave today, so we must be doing something right. Okay, guys, thanks, and we'll talk to you soon.